Let's talk about ancient Rome. But forget the gladiators and the grand architecture for a minute. We're going to look at the empire through a completely different lens, a wine glass. Because in Rome, wine was so much more than just a drink. It was the fuel that ran the entire empire.
I mean, think about it. When you have a glass of wine today, it's about relaxing, maybe celebrating something, or pairing it with a nice meal, right? But what if it was woven into the absolute fabric of your society? What if it was essential?
Well, for the Romans, that's exactly what it was. It was a pillar of their civilization. As we're going to see, it powered their economy, it defined social classes, it fueled their soldiers on the march, and it even connected them to their gods. So let's dive into how it helped to build the empire in the first place.
So, how on earth does a simple grape become a tool for building an empire? Well, it all starts with the Romans becoming absolute masters of winemaking, and then using that knowledge as a key part of their expansion. Now, the Romans were smart. They didn't reinvent the wheel here. They were expert adapters, and they learned from their neighbors. From the Etruscans, they picked up all these advanced skills for cultivating vines. And then from the Greeks down in southern Italy, they got new types of grapes, the whole culture around worshiping Bacchus, the god of wine, and this really crucial concept, terroir. You know, the idea that the land, the soil, the climate, it all gives a wine its unique character. And you can literally track the expansion of the Roman Empire by where they planted grapes. It's wild. As the Roman legions marched, the vines followed right behind them. After they perfected their craft in Italy, they took it on the road. They started planting vineyards in Gaul, which of course we now know as France, and all across Hispania, modern-day Spain. They were basically terraforming Europe into their own personal vineyard. But okay, you've got all this wine. How do you move it all across a massive, sprawling empire? You use this, the amphora. This clay vessel was, and I'm not kidding, the shipping container of the ancient world. Its standardized design was a stroke of absolute genius. It made it super easy to stack in the holds of ships and haul over land. The amphora wasn't just a pot. It was the logistical engine that powered the entire Roman wine economy. So the Romans could grow grapes, and they could ship wine. But where they really blew everyone else out of the water was in the production itself. They didn't just make wine, they industrialized it on a scale that the world had never, ever seen before. And this wasn't just simple farming. This was advanced agricultural science for the time. They used sophisticated pruning methods to control how the vines grew and to get better quality grapes. They mastered grafting to make their vines resistant to disease. They even built complex irrigation systems to grow grapes in drier climates. They really, truly understood which grapes to plant and where. Their process was incredibly organized, like a well-oiled machine. It all started with the vendemmia, this super careful harvest, all done by hand. Then came the pressing, the turcolar. First, the grapes were stumped by foot, and then they were put into these massive wooden screw presses to squeeze out every last drop of juice. That juice was poured into these enormous clay pots called dolia, which they buried underground, a brilliant natural form of temperature control for fermentation. Finally, the finished wine was sealed up in those trusty amphorae and stored in cellars to age. And all this massive production, it wasn't just for shipping overseas. Wine soaked into every single part of Roman life. I mean, every part. From the emperor's lavish banquet table right down to a simple soldier's daily ration. And this is where you can really see how wine was used to define your place in the world. The wine in your cup basically told everybody who you were. The elite were sipping these fine, aged wines like the legendary Falernian as a clear symbol of their status and power. Meanwhile, everybody else drank young, simple wine, often watered down. Even soldiers and slaves got a daily ration of a very low-quality wine called Laura. Because wine wasn't a luxury, it was considered a basic necessity for everyone, but it also clearly marked your rank in society. You've probably heard this saying from the Roman writer Pliny the Elder, in vino veritas, in wine there is truth. The Romans really believed this. The idea was that wine lowered your inhibitions and revealed your true character. So you can imagine it was absolutely essential for business deals, political discussions, and just about any social gathering. But it went way beyond the social scene. Wine was sacred. It was used in religious offerings to the gods. It was central to the worship of deities like Bacchus. It fueled these massive public festivals like the Bacchanalia. And, get this, it was also used as medicine, as a disinfectant for wounds, and mixed into all sorts of remedies. It was a true multi-tool of the ancient world.
So what happened to all this incredible knowledge when Rome eventually fell? Did it all just disappear into history? Not a chance. In fact, Rome's influence is probably sitting in your wine rack at this very moment.
See, while the political empire collapsed, its agricultural one endured. The vineyards that the Romans had planted all across Europe were preserved, largely by monks in monasteries during the Middle Ages. They became the keepers of these ancient winemaking traditions.
And you can still see that Roman legacy so clearly today. Those vineyards they planted in Gaul and Hispania, well, today we just call them Bordeaux, Burgundy, and Rioja. Modern techniques like pruning or building terraces on hillsides to grow grapes, that's straight out of the Roman playbook. Even the grapes themselves, Syrah, Sangiovese, are direct descendants of the varieties the Romans spread. And of course, the very words we use, like wine, from their word vinum, are a direct inheritance.
So the next time you pour a glass of wine, just take a second to look at it. You're not just holding a beverage, you're holding 2,000 years of history. You're tasting the legacy of an empire that understood, maybe better than anyone since, that a civilization can be built one vine at a time. What part of Rome will you see in your glass?